Music Business, What Is This? Is a podcast that focuses on the ever-changing music industry and presents issues and concerns that the average and above average musician has or will encounter. Hey everybody, this is Richard Johnson and I'm here today. This is Music Business, What Is This? Today we're going to be talking with a wonderful saxophone player. He's our guest, music educator, composer. He does it all in the music business. Let's give it up for we call him Wojo, and I'll let him pronounce his name because I want him to get it right for everyone to hear.
Wojciechowski.
Wojciechowski, that's right. You've heard it right here on Music Business. What is this? So today we're going to talk a little bit about what he does and where he comes from and how he got into the music business. So let's start with a little bit of background. Where are you from?
I'm originally from the Detroit area.
Detroit, but we're in Chicago. So
we're in Chicago.
How'd you end up in Chicago?
We ended up in Chicago mostly because of my wife. Initially, her job brought us here. So
Okay.
yeah,
It's interesting that you guys came here because it's not that far away, but
No.
Detroit is a great music city.
it is.
So
Yeah.
a lot of people are like,
It
well,
is.
why'd you come to Chicago? So for you, was that like a musical step up or was it parallel or how did you feel when you got here? Were you like, yeah, I'm in Chicago, this is the place?
Well, I played the first year I was here in 2002.
Mhm.
I played twice as many gigs as I did the previous year in Detroit.
Wow.
My first year in town.
First year.
So now there aren't as many gigs anymore, but
Mhm.
at that time, I mean, I kind of knew, and I knew some people here already before I moved here. So I knew the
Okay.
scene was on. I mean, the musicians in Detroit are world class. There are world class musicians in every town.
Mhm.
But there are more here than
All
there
right,
are
there's
there.
just
And
more
there's more
numbers of
opportunities to play. Just like New York City,
Yeah.
there's more of everything. There's
Right,
more
right.
amazing players and there's more bad players.
Right, you get both sides.
Exactly.
People don't really talk
Right.
about that
Yeah.
too much. But yeah, with more people comes more good and
Mhm.
more not so
Right.
good.
Exactly.
Okay, so you are a music educator and
I am.
you teach in high schools, correct?
I do.
All right, so did you go to college for education or how did you end up in education?
I did. So some people before I went to college, some people who I respected, primarily my primary jazz teacher, who was a saxophone player in Detroit named George Benson.
George Benson.
He went by George Sax Benson.
Okay, so it's
George
not
F.
the
Benson, not George Benson, the guitar player.
Yeah, the guitar player. Let's just
But
clarify
if you talk to
that.
anybody from Detroit,
they know
they
you're
know
talking
who
about.
I'm talking about, because he was
Okay.
kind of like the Von Freeman of Detroit
Okay.
at the time.
Okay, cool.
So he was my teacher, and he had been a postal carrier for his career, but he
Okay.
still played gigs at night. And at any rate, he encouraged me to study education.
Okay.
I had no intention of being a teacher, though.
Right. It's interesting because most players who are really trying to play and hit hard, they're not
Right.
really thinking about education at the time.
No, they aren't.
Yeah.
And I was no different. I went to school. So even though I was an ed major, I acted like a performance major. So
Okay.
I did all the things that a performance major would do, and I had a pretty singular focus on I'm going to finish school, learn as much as I possibly can in college, move to New York, and then do the thing.
Okay, so let's stop there. You're in school, you're playing music,
Mhm.
performer,
Mhm.
but you're getting education degree.
Mhm.
What was your routine to maintain practicing? Like, what did you do? Because that's a lot of credits.
It is.
It's a lot of education.
It is.
It's a lot of time, but
It
you
is.
still got to do gigs. So
Right.
I know college itself without doing education is a lot, but you're doing both. So did you
Right.
have a routine to balance
Yes.
that, or what was that?
Well, I think it came down to time management, and it came down to kind of setting, like, I would set these sort of semester goals, break them down into monthly goals, and then break those down into weekly goals. And this is kind of on top of the assignments I had in my lessons.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I want to be able to do X, Y, and Z, right? Like I want to be able to play all of my scales in alternating fourths or, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to transcribe these solos, and I want to learn these tunes. I just got really organized about it, and I wrote those things down, and then I would kind of break them into smaller chunks and then tackle them that way.
Okay,
So that way when I went to practice,
Mhm.
I knew I kind of had like
So you had a plan
I had a
prior
plan.
to. It wasn't like I'm going to sit down and shit, and then you figure it out. You were like, you sat down and you had it already all
I had it all
lined
figured out. I
So you
have
weren't
like
wasting time.
right. I had a long tone routine.
Mm-hmm.
I had a scale routine, and I still do. I mean, I still do those two things to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would get into, whatever music I was learning, whatever solos I was working on. I would spend time composing, playing piano. It was all broken up, and I would just fit stuff in wherever I could. If I could, every night I'd practice. If I didn't have a gig, I'd practice, 4 or 5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd also cut in, if I had a free hour during the day, I'd go in and get some stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
I never cut music classes, but I had a strategy for cutting non-music classes. I figured out what I could get away with and then get some extra practice in. So
typical musician.
Yeah.
Jazzer
Totally.
to the end.
Totally. I mean,
Yeah.
It's not like geology was going to really
yeah,
make
priorities,
me a better player.
priorities.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So let's go back to what we were talking about before. So you're in college, you've got this routine. You finish school.
Mm-hmm.
Then what?
So I moved to New York.
Okay.
And I started a master's degree at the Manhattan School of Music.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I did, but I only was there for one semester.
Oh, you left that out in all of our conversations in the past. Okay.
Mostly, for two reasons. One, I hated New York City, which kind of caught me by surprise. I didn't realize that I wasn't going to like living there.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What didn't you like? Because you're from Detroit. It's a big city, too.
It is, but it's different. New York is so fast and aggressive, and it just, I didn't like... It wasn't the music.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't it at all.
Everybody's like, I'm going for the music. I got to see the cats. They're hitting hard.
Exactly.
Right,
exactly. Right. That wasn't it. And I learned a lot, from the short time I was there. But just the pace of life in the city is so fast and aggressive. And, it's like you leave in the morning and you feel like...
You walk out your front door and bam!
You're just fighting your way home for the rest of the day,
Yeah.
And so after a few months, I kind of just I don't want to spend my whole life doing this. This is not how I want to live. And also at that point, I was engaged to who was going to become my wife, and I knew she was not going to like it.
Oh, okay.
So I knew that was going to be a thing.
You were setting up the future.
Exactly.
Right.
And so then I kind of had to make the decision, like, okay, well, if I'm not going to live in New York City and be a jazz musician, well, I'm going to have to go back to Detroit and figure this out. So,
okay, so from New York, do you come to Chicago?
No, I went back to Detroit.
Okay.
And so, I'll back up just a little bit. Prior to the last semester of college, prior to moving to New York, I did my student teaching. Mm-hmm. And I actually found out I liked teaching a lot more than I thought I would.
Okay, interesting. So you realized that during the student teaching.
Because you don't do very much teaching when you're in college until you get to student teaching. So you don't really find out what it's like to be a full-time teacher.
Okay, so you're preparing or they're preparing you.
Right.
But then once you get in the class, there it is. You got to do it.
You got to do right. Exactly.
So what is it you liked about it?
I really like sharing music with kids. And just because I love music, I just love it. All kinds of music. And so what kids get out of sharing that, and there's extra musical things you learn from studying music too. But primarily, there was a lot of fulfillment in sharing this music with students, and I guess I didn't realize that was going to be the case. So
was it the same type of feeling you get playing? Because when you're playing, we've talked about this, and you've got the cats in the band, and you just like that. This is what it is. I've been waiting for this moment. That energy. Is it that same type of energy, or is it a little bit different? Or, because that's what you do for your job. So
it's different. I don't know how to describe the difference. Because the moments that I've had on the bandstand that are amazingly special, those that is about the communication within the band, and those, like, everything falls into place, and it's just I've never gotten that with students. What I do get from students is watching them grow. Watching kids.
That's like when they graduate and they get it or something.
Yeah, right. Or even I've had students who were good players who get even better And, I have this guitar player right now that is probably the best improviser I've ever had.
Wow, that's a strong statement.
Right? And it's a joy to watch him. But then it's also a joy to watch a kid who can barely play, but learns how to persevere at something and gets better and better. And then really turns a corner, And so, I know that kid's not going to go into music, but hey, they're going to use that skill and that mindset in something else.
Right. I tell everybody, we need all of you, whether you go into it or not. Listeners, players, we need everybody.
Well, and then there's that's also a thing. Like I'm helping to create educated consumers of music.
Yeah.
So, I've been doing this long enough now that I have students will come see me play, or former students, right? And even now, some families come to see me play, and
nice.
So
okay,
it's like building your own audience.
Right, exactly. Okay, so you end up in Chicago. You said you were doing twice as many gigs. How did you end up teaching in a high school? Because I'm thinking as a musician, I'm doing twice as many gigs.
Right.
I'm good.
Right.
I'm making money. I'm working.
So that's a good question, actually. So when I was in Detroit, I was teaching elementary band, so beginning band, and then I did in the district I was in. It was a smaller district, and there was one high school, and the band director didn't want to do jazz band, so I did the jazz band. So I had elementary band and jazz band.
Okay.
Moved to Chicago. My first 2 years here, I taught middle school. Now I had always thought that there's no way I could be a high school band director.
Why is that? Because those three are
because of the time. Right?
The time it takes, or you have to invest in doing it? Okay, the time commitment.
So
it's a bigger time commitment in high school, you're saying, in middle school?
Or at least my perception was
okay.
The, all the athletic events and concerts and, So I thought, I'm not even interested in teaching at a high school. So I was teaching middle school, and I was also teaching adjunct at Northern Illinois University.
Okay, double dipping.
Plus, I was playing gigs.
Oh, he's working.
So,
all right.
I think the first 2 years I was in town, I put like 20,000 miles a year on my car.
Yeah, that's
driving.
You can do that here before you know it. I totally understand that. So at this point, had you already been in the Thelonious Monk competition?
Yes. That actually happened my first year of teaching.
So in Detroit.
In Detroit.
Okay.
Right.
So for those of you listening who don't know, it's now called the Herbie Hancock Institute, but you were a finalist, right? With Jimmy Green
and John Gordon.
Right.
And so also that year, John Ellis, Ralph Bowen, Joel Fromm, Dave Pietro. There's a lot of people.
So a lot of super bad cats.
Yeah.
Right.
It was a hang.
Yeah, right.
It was a hang.
So I'm not just talking to a guy off the street who picked up the saxophone player. Just so you guys are clear about this, he's been hitting heavy for a lot of years. All right, so you're in that competition. You come here. You're working. Middle school. You just decided to go to high school?
Well, so what happened was a friend of mine, somebody I had met, I don't know, 7 or 8 years prior to that, teaching at a music camp in Wisconsin named Birch Creek, was teaching at the high school that I teach at. I've taught at for the last 20 years. And so his colleague was leaving to go to a different school. The way that job was set up, there was kind of such a division of labor. There were multiple jazz bands. It was set up in a way that after talking to him on the phone for an hour, I thought, you know what? I think I can do this.
It's not as bad as I imagined.
And it was really attractive to me because I was going to teach multiple jazz bands, music theory, a little bit of band. And my job's evolved over the years. I've done different things. But initially that was, I was kind of brought in to be the jazz guy. So that's a unique position. That doesn't exist at a lot of schools.
Yeah.
And also there's always been at least 2 of us teaching band. At times we've had 3.
Wow.
Depending on enrollment.
How big is the high school?
Well, right now it's just under 2,000, but we've been as big as almost 2,600.
Wow, that's huge.
It is.
Yeah, so you need 3.
Right. And then so what comes with that in terms of still having a playing career is that, I'm judicious about taking time off. So it's not like I can just go out on the road for 2 weeks, right? And I knew that making that decision. But sometimes some opportunities come along where we can kind of cover for each other.
You just can't say no. You got to do the gig.
So it's like, I got to go do this gig, but
Right.
we have a concert that night, so
Okay.
my colleague will cover for me.
Right.
And I don't think I abuse it. I try not to.
Right,
So,
right. Well, that seems to be the key in education. It's like you got to work. You're a
Right.
musician, but at the same time, you don't want to abuse the privilege because
Exactly.
you do have benefits. You have a job.
Absolutely. I mean, I suppose it's the same in college too, right? You
Mhm.
can't just disappear for 8 weeks and not teach your classes and your lessons. And
Yeah, that would be very difficult to do. My school and a lot of other schools. I'm sure it's been done, but
Right.
probably not to the satisfaction of the dean.
right, or even the students,
Or the students,
right?
right?
I mean,
right.
I had a friend who was
Mhm.
at Manhattan, and his teacher
Mhm.
basically, was gone the whole semester.
Yeah.
And then tried to make up all the lessons in like a Saturday. Like, we're just gonna hang all day.
right.
You know?
I've seen that. Not a good look.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is your routine now? Because you said you've been at the school
Mhm.
20 years. You obviously have established a routine, a relationship with everyone, and you're working, right?
Mhm.
You've got a new CD
Mhm.
that just came out. What do you do to maintain playing?
Well, to maintain play, I play all day at school.
So you've got the horn in your mouth.
I've got the horn in my mouth, right? So I'm playing with the students.
Mhm.
And I'm a big believer in kind of basic skills things anyway. So every ensemble spends some time working on long tones, lip slurs, scales, arpeggios, that kind of stuff, right?
Mhm.
So, but I'm connected to the instrument. Like in the jazz groups, I'm playing saxophone. In the concert bands, I'm playing flute or clarinet to keep those doubles up because I don't have a lot of practice time. So my
Okay.
practice time is
Mhm.
usually dedicated to like whatever gigs I have coming up, music I've got to learn.
Yeah, the music you got to get on.
Right. So I just don't. I remember back in college, Billy Hart telling us that practice all you can now, because if you think you're busy now, you just wait.
Yep.
And he was 110% right.
Yeah, that's one of the famous lines. You hear it, but you don't realize it
No,
till you're in the
You
middle
really
of it.
don't.
And you got to take advantage of that time
Mhm.
when you're in college because it's not
You'll
going to come
never
back.
get 6 hours a day ever
Yeah.
again,
Exactly.
unless you're not working.
Yeah, that's
which
true.
case-
But the goal is to work.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's what
So-
this podcast is, to
Right.
help you find work.
Mhm.
Okay, so you're working, you've got the CD out.
Mhm.
Any plans in the future? You're just going to teach till you drop, or after you're
Well-
done, you're going to try to tour?
Yeah.
Or,
I mean, officially,
Mhm.
to get a pension here in Illinois, I've got to do about 10 more years.
Okay.
And at that point, I think I will probably retire and
Okay.
then really lean into
Just play
Playing.
all day.
Right. Play as much as possible.
Yeah.
It'll give me the opportunity, I think, to do more traveling,
Okay.
which I can't. It's difficult right now to go out of town
Mm-hmm.
to play gigs.
Do you ever
right?
feel like you missed out sometimes because, there may be a couple weeks or people or things
Yeah, and there have been things I've had to say no to
no to?
that really hurt.
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
honest, I mean,
Mhm.
it was. I did not want to say no, but
Mhm.
my job has to come first.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's my primary bread and butter. And,
Right.
and I know there are things that people don't call me for because they just
They
kind of
know.
assume
Right.
I'm not going to be able to do it. So that's a trade-off, right? You have to be
Yeah.
willing to accept that you can't possibly do everything,
Right.
you know? So
Cool. All right. Well, I think we've learned a lot here today. It's been a pleasure for me as always. I've learned a lot.
Likewise.
Yeah, and just hanging out with this guy, we've had a chance to play on a tenor time, and hopefully we'll do some recordings and playing in the future. I'm Richard Johnson. This is Music Business. What is this? Thank you for joining us.
thank you for
And
having
we'll
me.
see you out there in cyberspace sometime soon. See you later. This program is partially supported by a grant from the Illinois Arts Council Agency.